So last week, I replaced my Manjaro KDE with ArcoLinux Xmonad. Now I do plan to make videos in the future going over Xmonad, my config, how to get started with it, so on and so forth. But today, I want to focus solely on ArcoLinux and how to get started with installing it on your system. With that being said, let's get started. So when you first go to ArcoLinux.com, or in this case, ArcoLinux.info, you get greeted with a whole host of information. It starts off by going over their May release, which added a couple different ISOs and slightly changed the way you install ArcoLinux. Goes over a new window manager, FVWM3, and a bunch of different ways to install ArcoLinux. Now today I'm going to go over just one way to do it, which is the easiest way, but there are multiple different ways to do this. Now the thing that makes ArcoLinux stand out amongst other Arch-based Linux distributions is that ArcoLinux provides many different window managers to choose from. So here you can see all the different window managers that you have to choose from. Cinnamon, GNOME, DWM, Budgie, Deepin, Awesome, i3, OpenBox, Mate, Qtile, Plasma, Xmonad, XFCE. There is just a ton of different window managers that you can choose for your install. Now, it can get a little confusing when you go to actually download, because when you click on downloads, you're greeted with this bunch of different sources, a bunch of different ISOs, and it could be confusing of, well, what's ArcoLinux L, S, D, B, what are these different things? Well, to make it easier, they actually have an infograph going over the different versions and what they mean. So ArcoLinux L is essentially their base ISO that comes with XFCE by default, but you can add on other window managers as you see fit. And it also comes with all pre-installed software. So GIMP, a calculator, Inkspace, both Firefox and Chromium, bunch of other Firewall, Discord, bunch of other applications, and I'll go over some of them once we get to the install. ArcoLinux S is the exact same as L. The only difference is there's no software pre-installed. You choose everything that you want. With ArcoLinux D, this is more terminal based. It doesn't come with any pre-installed software. It doesn't come with any network drivers, printer drivers, Bluetooth, or anything. You basically build it from scratch. Then ArcoLinux B is minimal software installed, and instead of going and choosing just a base config with XFCE, you go through and choose the ISO you want. Xmonad, Qtile, Plasma, so on and so forth. In fact, let me show you. So it's ArcoLinux B. Click on B, and it immediately takes you to all the different desktop environments that you have to choose from. So if we were to click GNOME, here's the ISO for ArcoLinux GNOME. We can do the same thing with Plasma. Oops, if I can click on it right, XFCE, and so on and so forth. So today we're going to go with ArcoLinux L because I want to show you all the various pre-installed software that it comes with and kind of gives you a best experience of what you're supposed to get out of the box. So to get started, click over here to Downloads. I'm going to choose ArcoLinux L. And for whatever reason, this has always been confusing me. When you click on L, it then jumps you to a bunch of other options as well. If you have to click L again, it should just automatically jump to it like it did for ArcoLinux B, but that's just me. And then we just click on the ISO, and then starts downloading it, and then we can go from here, and once it's done downloading, we'll load it up into a VM and show you how what the install process is. So now that we have ArcoLinux set up and ready to go in a VM, I'm gonna walk through how to actually go through the install. So when you first boot it up, you are greeted with the welcome app, and you just hit Run Calamaris, and then that will take you through the install. Eventually, VMs here are a little bit slow, so it might take a few extra seconds to load up. Oh, there we go. Finally. So American English, that is correct. Now, what we're going to do here for this purposes of this VM is I'm not going to select any of the available options. I'm going to leave everything by default so you can see what it comes with by default. However, I do want to make a note about something. If you want to install the LTS kernel, here's what I recommend doing. The regular kernel and the LTS kernel. Then when you hit next and it asks you about drivers, do both the regular and the LTS driver. If you do not do all 4 of those options, you will not be able to properly boot into the LTS kernel. I've personally had issues with this myself when I was getting Xmonad to work properly, so make sure all 4 options are selected when you go through the install. That being said, let's move on. This is the login manager. Again, we're going to leave it by default, but usually LightDM is the one that's the default one for XFCE. So why they chose SDDM, I don't know, but hey, we're going with the defaults here today. Here's what makes ArcoLinux stand out, as I mentioned before. When you go through and choose either ArcoLinux L or ArcoLinux S with or without pre-installed software, it automatically chooses XFCE to be installed. That's always on there. But then you can go through and add extra window managers. You can add Awesome, BSPW, Mate, Xmonad, Qtel. You can add all these extra window managers to your system if you want to. It gives you the absolute most control of any distribution of Linux that I've ever seen. For now though, we're just going to leave it by default, but I just wanted to show that this is really what makes it stand out. Here you choose the communication software that you may want. So if you want Zoom or Slack or whatever else, you would choose that. But again, remember, we keep it by default. This is development software. So if you're doing something with coding or programming, you would choose one of these options. Here you have the Linux versions of Word documents or Word document software. So OmniOffice, WP Office, LibreOffice, things like that. We're going to leave it by default. Audio and video software, so this would allow you to play back video and audio as you need. I like celluloid, but you might want VLC for video playback needs. But again, leaving it there. Internet, this is for web browser. Now there should be web browsers pre-installed by default, so we're going to see what it comes with here. Theming, this is for extra theming that you may want. You can choose what you want there. Graphics, so this is for if you're working with graphic design. So you're doing something with 3D modeling and things of that nature, you can choose an application that's best for that. Gaming, there are a few different gaming applications, and there are also gaming tools that allow you to download software from Steam, Epic Game Store, and things like that. You have the various terminals that you can choose from. I like Kitty, but there are many different options there. File managers should be one by default, but there are other options. Oddly enough, Thunar is in here. I think that's one of the ones that are pre-installed by default, but you can add other ones as you see fit. This is for things like if you want Snap or Flatpak support, if you want something to clean out your system cache, like bleach beds, you'd be able to do things with this. See information about your computer, CPU X. This is where all the extra, I think we're almost done here, yep. This is where all the extra stuff comes from. So if you need other accessory programs, special fonts, if you need Git applications, password managers, privacy, VirtualBox, things like that, you can add it through here. And then here are other software for developers and all that. We're going to ignore that for now. And then this is where you go through and select your location. Sure, yep, Los Angeles, that's correct. English default, perfect. We're going to erase this disk. Normally, if you're going through this, you might want to choose swap to a file. Essentially what a swap does is, let's say you use up all your memory through various means. Well, in Linux, what would happen is your system would just crash. Unlike in Windows, where it can take part of your hard drive and use that as memory. It would be really, really slow, but you would effectively still be able to use your computer. This is kind of doing the same thing. So there's swap with hibernate, no hibernate. I believe the swap with and without hibernate means that if it does end up needing swap files, it's able to keep that even when you're in hibernate mode. And then if you want to instead of saying like swap and then choose the amount of swap space you have, so in this case it would be 4.3 gigs, you can choose swap to a file, which by default it only takes up, I believe, 1 gigabyte, but then as needed it adds more space depending on how much memory or virtual memory you end up needing. Now, that's essentially what a swap is. We're going to leave that as no swap for now because this is just for testing purposes. Hit next, and we're going to choose the name of the computer. We're going to choose FK for FOSS King. Password, you always want to make sure to have a very strong and complicated password so that people can't hack into your computer all that well. So something really strong and complicated. Okay, and let's do a little repeat. Alright, so log in automatically without asking for the password, something you normally wouldn't want to add. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to select it. Using the same password for the administrator account, by default, the first user you create will have access to administrator privileges. So selecting this option is really great if you don't want to have to worry about having two different passwords, one for your normal user and one for your root user if you're doing stuff in the terminal and you need to be a super user. So here it just goes over the information that you selected, keyboard, location information, partitions, and we just click install. And then from here it'll just go through and install a system. So as you can see, the other thing that really makes ArcoLinux shine is the customization of all the different software you can choose to have by default. See, normally when something like Manjaro, Ubuntu, Linux Mint, they kind of tell you what software is coming with your system and you don't have much of a say about it. Here with ArcoLinux, you can decide. Now, I purposely chose the ArcoLinux LDesk just so that you can see all the available software that it comes with by default. But if you don't want any pre-installed software, choose ArcoLinux S, and then you choose what you want from those lists of options, which really makes ArcoLinux incredibly powerful and customizable. So I'm going to let this install and let it do its thing, and when it finishes, we'll come right back here. Alright, now that it has finished installing, what we're going to do is go ahead and restart the machine. Now on normal hardware, you would click restart now and done, but in this case, because we're running in a VM, we need to do things a little differently. So first we're going to click over to, I believe it's 5, yep. Go over to your main VirtualBox machine and we're going to right click and close, power off the machine. Then go into settings, storage, to remove attachment. We want to remove disk from virtual drive. The reason we need to do that, because with the VM, if you don't do that every single time you boot up a system, it will boot up in that live environment. It will not boot in to the disk that you, or the drive that you created for this VM. So with that, let's go in and let's restart the VM and see what it looks like when we boot it up from scratch. So here we are booting into the newly made VM, and when you start it, you automatically you're greeted with this welcome app where you have a bunch of different information to where you can donate to the project, you can get new release info, you can see their YouTube channel, a few of their other channels. For now though, we're going to just quit that, and I should have unselected the auto start, but that's fine. So by default, if we go in, we see we have Firefox as a web browser, and we should also have Chromium as a web browser. We should get Inkscape, which is a graphics tool. It's kind of like Microsoft Paint, but on steroids, and free and open source. So it's a fantastic product if you're looking for something like Microsoft Paint, but free and open source. It also should come, if I recall correctly, with Discord. Discord also comes by default, which you can use. So if you need to use that for school or work, what have you, you have that there. And AdBlock is also here. I'm not sure how well that works. I have ad blocking applied to my network. I have a whole system set up there. You also should have access to Firewall built in by default. You have a calculator app. You have a color picker app. Inkscape, as I showed you before, KVentum Manager, which helps to set what the GUI should look like for KVentum based applications. Meld, I'm actually not sure what Meld is. Oh, it's for Git, if you're merging files to push to GitLab. Nomax image viewer. Then you have NVIDIA server settings. That would change if you had like an AMD graphics card. This would be AMD NVIDIA graphics or AMD graphics. This is just for NVIDIA. You also have a music player here. So Paraquat, I think. Probably butchering that horribly. Qubit torrent for torrenting files if you're into that kind of thing. I may or may not make a video about that in the future, but I don't want YouTube to just shut down my videos, so we'll see about that one. You also have a built-in task manager, so you can see how much of the CPU is being utilized, how many processes, how much memory is being used up, and it's actually pretty light for VM, which is kind of nice. You have Telegram, which is sort of another type of communication services. You have a few different terminal emulators, terminal emulator, Termite, URXVT, a few different options to choose from there. USB image writer and stick formatter. You have Variety, which is a way to change your wallpapers. So if I recall correctly, this allows you to use key bindings to select your wallpaper. So if I believe control left, it might be alt, or control right rather, might be alt right. I can't remember alt right. Alt right goes through and changes the wallpaper depending on what directory you have it set for. So you see we can easily just scroll through all the various wallpapers and see what they have. That looks pretty nice. You know what, we're going to leave it at that because it's a little slow because it's in VM. But that's just a quick and easy way to be able to scroll through your wallpapers and select them. Other than that, a lot of the... Oh, there is yet another web browser, Vivalogy. It's not free and open source, but this web browser is somewhat unique in that you can completely customize the way that everything looks. Although again, I don't really love using it because it's proprietary software. But if you need something that's super and highly customizable, you might want to look into this for your use case. Yes, I'm okay to exit. Sometimes this might pop up, so a default keyring essentially makes it so that when you launch an application that needs sudo privileges, and it went away, you would put in a specific password and then you would be able to get into that application. That might end up coming back. We'll see what happens there. So there's that other web browser, configuring workspaces. Vim is installed by default, which is always, I don't know why you open up a terminal, not just open up Vim, but there we go. We have Vim installed, and we don't have, I don't believe, SuperIntr opens up a terminal. I do not believe, let's zoom in here, Control Shift, there we go. I do not believe that we have NeoVim. No, do we have Nano? We do have Nano. Okay, let's see what else we want. Emacs? Nope, so we have Vim and Nano installed by default when you choose everything by default for ArcoLinux. Other than the various applications that get pre-installed when you choose ArcoLinux L, there isn't too much that sets this apart from other Linux distributions once you actually get it installed and up and running. You get a pre-themed XFCE layout, you can choose the various tiny window managers, but there is one application, one thing that is unique to this that does add some extra functionality once you get it installed, and that's the ArcoLinux Tweak tool. Put in our super secret password so we can access this. So what Tweak tool allows you to do is change various settings within your computer without having to go and dig around for things on your own. So you can choose the things that get auto started when you launch the computer. Desktop installer, now this is a killer feature. If you wanted to, you can go through here and select any of those window managers that I showed you before, and you can go through here and install them yourself. So if you wanted to try Qtile, you can install it. However, the only downside here is that it backs up it overrides your .config directory, and so the one you currently have, it creates a backup of it so that you don't lose anything. So if you were wanting to mess around with other desktop environments after installing it and getting all your apps and all your settings and all that, just know that the .config does get overwritten and a backup file or backup one is made. I'll go over how this works more in a future video, but for now, just know that you might need to be aware of that information. You can also choose the grub theme, so when you go in and automatically start up your computer, you can choose the various ISOs that you have to choose from, or rather Linux distributions that you have on your computer. You can choose what that grub theme actually looks like. You can enable the ad blocker if you want. We don't need to enable it here, but you can. If you have LightGM, you can choose the settings for that as well. NeoFetch, so what NeoFetch does when you launch up a terminal and this comes up, here, let me zoom in for you so you can actually see it properly. This is NeoFetch. It shows you the various information about your computer, and here it allows you to actually select what is and isn't showing, so that's pretty cool. Pacman config, so this is Arch's official repository that you use to download various applications, so you can change settings within that. So here you have the Termite themes, and what Termite is a terminal emulator that I believe is based on XFCE, although it might be a thing specific to ArcoLinux, I've forgotten. And this allows you to change the various themes for Termite. So you see here I've chosen the green screen theme, but if I wanted to, I can go up to here, choose Dracula, hit apply, go in, exit out, and you go and launch it again, Termite. It will then choose a different theme, so it's another fun way to be able to customize your terminal emulator. If you wanted to use a theme switcher, if you were using i3 or Awesome, you can change the various themes right here in Tweak Tool. And then ZSH themes, if you had ZSH installed, you can switch the theme that was being used for it. So that's pretty nice. So basically the Tweak Tool allows you to change various things that you normally would have to dig through settings and forums online to figure out how to do, but right there within that application. So that was an overview of ArcoLinux and how you initially figure out the website and know how to choose the various ISOs and what everything looks like when you initially boot in to ArcoLinux for the first time. I also want to apologize for the small screen on the VM. I was having trouble getting it to boot up properly. Whenever I went into full screen, it would look weird on my Xmonad config, so my apologies for that. But I at least wanted to show you, to the best of my ability, what ArcoLinux looks like by default when you first put into it. It's a fantastic Linux distribution that gives you the control to choose whatever tiling window or whatever desktop environment you want, multitude of different tiling window managers to choose from, as well as being able to properly control all the different software that you want on your system without having to be chosen for you. That is, if you don't choose ArcoLinux L. And that's about all I have to say about that. If you liked the video, click the like button. If you really liked it, subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day. See ya!